Podcasting since 2005. This is the King of Podcasts radio network, kingofpodcasts.com.
Digital streaming wants to take away more from radio, while radio wants to hold on to more of its turf.
The King of Podcasts radio network proudly presents the Broadcasters Podcast. Here is the King of Podcasts.
Welcome to the Broadcasters Podcast. King of Podcasts here with you. You can find the show, of course, kingofpodcasts.com. You can click on the link. You can find all the past episodes for the program. You can also find the episodes all major podcast platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, YouTube Music, among many others. Did I say Spotify? Yes, I'm sure I said Spotify. Because we like Spotify. I am a subscriber. So for me, that's where my territory is when it comes to digital. I like Spotify and I like YouTube. But Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube are continuing to chip away at radio in their various forms and showing that radio is not a factor here. And it's one of those things where radio continues to be the ongoing subject for me on this program because of the fact that if you want to look at the digital disruption that we talk about all the time, which is all these internet-based platforms, whether it's streaming television, streaming music, or streaming audio in general, continues to get blasted. They are taking over the linear, traditional forms of platforms, which physical units no longer are an issue because everything's in the cloud, everything's online. And the way people can access it is just so much easier than ever before. But then there are things that are supposed to gauge and chart where things are when it comes to radio, when it comes to streaming and other places, that it's changing. And that there are some platforms, notably Billboard magazine, that needs to change with the times. But they're trying to put the best foot forward for both sides. So Billboard, as a chart company, as a music publisher, it's a magazine publisher for news and all, I must once again implore them to pay attention to what is going on around them. When we talk about the stagnation of the Billboard charts and where music is right now and the process where radio is stalling everything. Let me give you the example most of all. From Talk of the Charts on X, there's a big point about a historical factor with the song Lose Control by Teddy Swims. So it has spent 91 weeks on the Billboard Hot 100 and 61 weeks in the top 10. Now, because of recurrence rules, which I can't even tell you what the methodology of Billboard is. I just get it from secondhand accounts. But the Billboard methodology is that a song doesn't go recurrent if it stays in the top 10. And the reason the song for Lose Control stays in the top 10 is because of the fact that it is still being supported by streaming. It's being supported by radio. It is still being streamed. There's no doubt about that. But more than that, it's because of the fact that radio airplay continues to be the factor here. And there's nothing being changed about it at all. When it comes to the top 10 songs of all time on the Billboard Hot 100 chart, at this moment, 4 of those songs come from the period of 2019 to 2024, according to the current methodology of the charts. Number 1 is Blinding Lights in all of the top 10 songs of all time. The longest running songs of all time. A bar song, Tipsy by Shabuzi, is number 3 on that chart. Stay is number 8. And Lose Control is now number 9. The Kid Laroi and Justin Bieber, by the way, is the song Stay, if you want to remember what it was. But yes, when those songs, and Lose Control right now is at 91 weeks, that songs are allowed to be on the chart for more than 2 years. It's ridiculous. The recurrence factor that's in there has to be a cutoff. The cutoff should be a full year. A full calendar year. And then the song has to go to a recurrent chart or somewhere else. But it should not be on the Billboard Hot 100. we're talking about the most current songs on the charts. Why do we have all these songs from 2024 still on the chart now in the middle of May? There can be some, but there's so many now that it's really hard to go and just understand. And the only thing that can keep Lose Control right now from staying in the top 10, because right now it's currently number 9 on the charts as of the last chart that has dropped, which is the week ending May 16th, 2025. Only Morgan Wallen right now will be able to go ahead and knock Lose Control off the top 10 because he will have an album bomb because his album is releasing and it will reflect in the next week's chart for the 23rd. That's the only thing it'll have. But otherwise, radio could just increase airplay, whatever they want to do. But Morgan Wallen's going to get radio airplay for what he has because some of his songs are going to be pretty big in country radio, so they're going to do anything, can't do much about it anyway. There's no answer to that right now. And the current predictions of the Hot 100, Lose Control is expected to stay in the top 10. We don't know what else is going to happen after that. And there's an interesting thing here where the Talk of the Charts also put out a comparison of the top 10 of the charts from last year's chart to this year's chart, and to see what songs are still up there. So for the chart ending May 18th, 2024, Not Like Us was a new number 1 song in the country. $1 Million Baby, Euphoria, Fortnite, Like That, Family Matters by Drake, and Espresso were all top 10. But among the songs they had here, Beautiful Things and Lose Control and a bar song were all in the top 10. And then the chart for May 17th, 2025. You still have a bar song now at number 4. You have Beautiful Things at number 8. And you still have Lose Control at number 7. And that's not counting what other songs are on the charts now that have been on there for a long time. And if you look at the number of weeks they're on the charts, 67 weeks for Benson Boone, Beautiful Things. 56 weeks for a bar song. And that's not counting Luther, up for 24 weeks. Die With a Smile, 38 weeks. And the fact that Lose Control again is at 90 weeks. It's just being done that way. And there's no answer to it. But if we look at what the charts show, it's the radio airplay that is saying everything. Because when you look at the songs that get the airplay, that's what's keeping these songs up where they are. And I just want to be able to make my point. So at the moment, in the top 10 of the Billboard Hot 100, in terms of the music charts as we speak right now, we shouldn't even talk about the fact that Birds of a Feather is still listed on the charts 51 weeks, just outside at number 11. I Had Some Help, Post Malone, Morgan Wallen, is now a full year, 52 weeks. And Espresso is at 56 weeks. Just inside of the top 20. Now, in the airplay for radio at this moment. So Luther is being held up by it has sales, 19 million streams, 66 million spins on airplay. And it stays up there. Ordinary Alex Warren, which is number 1 in many charts now across the world, stays at number 2. If you took away radio airplay, Ordinary by Alex Warren would be number 1 because it would dominate streaming and sales. Die With a Smile, 53.3 million spins for airplay, 16 million for streaming. So where it's at, radio is definitely keeping that up there as well, or else that song would tumble down into the top 10 and will not be at number 3 where it's at. Bar song, 45 million spins of airplay for a song, again, that is over a year old. And Lose Control has still 33 million spins of airplay. So it's a medium rotation, but it's still being played all over the place. Same thing for Benson Boone, Beautiful Things. 36 million spins of airplay. But their streaming is what? 15 million for Beautiful Things, 17 million for Lose Control. But part of it is, you know what? If radio continues to go and put the airplay up very strong, then of course the radio audience that might not be listening to radio and listens to streaming because of hybrid, then you're still inflating the numbers for those artists, the established music label artists, to put them up. Because the other thing too is that the labels also want to make sure that certain songs stay in the streaming charts. So in the streaming services for Spotify, they're today's top hits, or for Apple's major playlist, their top playlist. The labels, there's not other songs that can be provided in there, and there are not any bona fide songs in there too. So like Spotify and Apple Music and YouTube as well, they all have to kind of supply the fact that they have a playlist that is not being replenished with new songs that are bona fide hits either. Because that particular list, which a lot of people will go ahead and subscribe and follow to, they behoove to the fact that they're not just going to put anybody in that list. There's a select number of artists of 50 songs usually, right, that get to be on that list. So radio and its control and the power grab they want to have, these corporate radio companies, that they want to be able to have the ownership caps drop so they can get more stations and more property and be able to own more of everything. They just don't care what they're doing to leave a wake in the track. They just want to leave everything just damaged, and corporate just wants to own more to make more. But we know the corporate system will not do anything to actually maximize these stations for creativity, for the purpose of serving the radio audience, not just the audience that's existing, but about the audience that could be listening. There's no reason why people shouldn't be listening to radio. If it was good, you can make the argument that people could go back to radio and listen to it. You can make it relevant again. It's very simple. But they don't want to do that. With new music, it would make such a difference, which is why there's a couple of things I'm waiting for to happen. The local Radio Freedom Act. If we can get that bill passed through Congress and forcing more poignant royalties charged on the radio stations, the corporate radio companies would have to unload. And the NAB as a lobbying arm would be kind of ineffective and mute and neutered pretty much, as a matter of fact. And if the ownership caps were tightened instead of loosened, that would be much better. But it's an age of deregulation now, the FCC, because that's the mandate. It's not what I want, but we don't have any choice about that. So there is a post on Reddit that talks about the stagnation of the Hot 100 Top 10 this year is insane, and we're already in May. And this is in the general music discussion portion of Reddit. And some of the comments being made are said exactly what it is. One actually just said it exactly the way I said it, from Mercury Waxing. They need to recalibrate how they do charts and count streaming. Well, they just need to go ahead and change the methodology that streaming counts as more. And that radio would have to change in order to be relevant. Because radio just can't keep it just like this forever. Radio has too much control as to what the charts say. And we know that Morgan Wallen's new album is going to go ahead and come in, but it will clear a lot of dead weight on the chart. Album bombs do a good job of kind of clearing out the chart and things just kind of get shaken up because we need that. But there's not that many album bombs that are out there that can actually do the damage. Unless Taylor Swift's out there or Drake. And even Drake doesn't even have that kind of staying power anymore. Maybe if Kendrick Lamar had a new album and he puts it out, probably would do the same thing. But at the moment, some of the bona fide artists aren't able to do that. Lady Gaga came in, couldn't do anything on the album bomb. Sabrina Carpenter did pretty well. But like, really, Ariana Grande, there's not a new album out there yet for her. She had their deluxe edition come out. The original of her album didn't really do much. Like, it was there, but like, album bombs right now really just hit to the bottom half of the chart. There's nobody hitting to the very top. The last one really this year was Bad Bunny. And that's it. But otherwise, we got so much stagnation all over the board. And we know there's a lot of reasons why. If it was in a different time period where in the early part of a decade, we would see the decade change where tastes in music would change along with the date, right? It happened with 50s to 60s, 60s to 70s, 70s to 80s, 80s to 90s, 90s to 2000. And we would have this hybrid of music that would come in where rock would have a change in evolution, pop would have an evolution, hip hop would have an evolution. All of them did. Dance music would go through an evolution, And we would just get a bit of a change, and the taste of music, maybe things would be more rhythmic, more higher paced, more exciting. We're not getting that right now. And there's only a select few artists that are allowed that can put out music, but the music labels also just want to go ahead and control what's going on out there. Because all these linear, traditional outlets, the music labels, the record labels, the radio stations, they want to hold on to theirs. So they're willing to go ahead and slow down the industries for their own bidding, which will screw up the digital outlets unless artists from these smaller artists that have some marketing and might get some virality, they're able to go and do something to move themselves up. But that's very tough, difficult. When you think about it, look at some of the artists that we have right now and how much it takes for them to go and get themselves moved up the charts and become something important. I think of some of the artists that we have right now. Alex Warren is UK. Lil Young is UK. Somber is another artist I keep seeing out here. He's an American songwriter, but a lot of TikTok presence for him. But then there's others that are out here. We're just like waiting. Like, just what are we going to do? There's just not enough music coming out right now, especially during this part of the year. You would think we would have so many albums that are being put out as we speak. But at the moment, we're not getting that much of anything. So as we said, for this week, we got Morgan Wallen and I'm the Problem that's coming out with a new album. The following week, we got what? Joe Jonas with a new album. There's nobody else of note. Garbage comes out with a new album, but like, okay. A visual album from Miley Cyrus, Something Beautiful, is at the end of the month. Addison Rae will have a new album called Addison on June 6th. And I'm just looking like, where are some of the names that are going to really make a big difference on the charts? Oh, Lil Wayne, The Carter 6 is coming out June 6th. A new Pulp album, a new Doobie Brothers album. I don't know if that's a new one or not, or if it's just some rehash or whatever. But like, there's not much of anyone right now that's putting out of new albums. American Heart, Benson Boone, that's coming out June 20th. Probably be a big deal about that. But like I said, the albums are not a big deal right now. And singles are not doing much either, unless you have somebody that's able to go and do the rigging to let the songs just fester in streaming and in radio. But it all starts with radio first. And what the record labels can still do to promote, to generate sales, and they can also try to get to generate streaming as well, because that's what they're able to do. And there's no answer for that. And it's not as if the music tastes of the younger audiences are just saying, oh, we like to hear songs over and over for, year and a half, 2 years. I don't think so. It's just like any other taste. When you have songs that are 2 years old, okay, you play them once in a while, but you're not playing them 50, 70 times a week like they're still new. That's not what's supposed to be happening. But there's no answer to that. So we can go into two different directions. We can talk about what radio is doing right now to try to hold on to their spot, or talk about the digital disruptors and what they're actually doing right now to chip away at radio. But we should talk about the digital disruption and what they're actually doing right now, because the writing's on the wall for them. Radio has reasons to be concerned. I don't know if they really care right now, because it hasn't done much to their bottom line yet. It's like they can still hold on to their debt. They can still hold on to slim to no ad revenue at all. No increases. I mean, the way that the Bob Pittmans of the world and Odyssey and Cumulus and all these other radio companies can go and like finagle themselves around and try to make their stockholders happy. It's real mental gymnastics when you think about it. Edison Research has in their study, their share of ear study, that more than half of Americans aged 13 and older paid for at least one audio subscription service in the first quarter of 2025. More than half. The number of people subscribing to multiple services is dropping. The data indicates 35% subscribe to one service, 10% to two, 6% to more than two. I don't know how anybody can do that. How you can go and subscribe to multiple music services. I get that for television because of accessing all the programming. That's different. But music, all the platforms basically have all the music that's out there. And it's really just a matter of like, some music services are more catered to others than more than not. Like more genres anyway. So when I think about Spotify, when it comes to Latin music, Afrobeats, when it comes to anything urban related or dance related, I get a better run using Spotify because of the catalog they have over there to find music. And if you want to catch the playlist so you can get a little taste of what my music taste is, from either nostalgic to current, then feel free to go ahead and look at kingofpodcasts.com. You can find all my weekly playlists on Spotify that I put out. And I actually still update them every week. Like, I'm always tinkering with those particular playlists to put out the best possible music mix on all those. On all rock format, on all urban format. And again, expanding the whole gamut of music. Like, we're talking about decades of music in all these different genres. My Today's Hits and Yesterday's Anthems, which is a great mix of everything's from the 2000s in a real well set up place where it just fits right. And, it feels like everything's like, it meshes really well. You'd be surprised. My Timeless Hits collection, the Rock Vault, there's so much more. But again, kingofpodcasts.com. Just look for all the playlists I have over there on Spotify. You can find it there on the website. And you can click through and go and subscribe and follow. And I hope you'll do. Now, we've talked about Spotify. We talked about Amazon trying to create more AI features to help create more of a personality, a voice to carry the music with you when you're listening in. So Spotify now has expanded their AI DJ feature with voice-based music requests for premium users. I'm still not into this yet because they're making it where they have their set playlists, the deists, the ways where you make a mix of music based on your mood or what you're doing. I'm not really much into that. I like my playlist because I like a format like a radio station. But, the DJ X is still in here, and they set up this now. The DJ feature is now, the engagement has nearly doubled over the past year, they said. So, new music requests feature. It'll be available in over 60 markets where DJ is currently supported. So, again, the US already has it. So, Spotify talks about the fact that serving up suggestions using AI and insights from our global editorial experts, DJ helps you uncover new tracks, rediscover old favorites, and connect deeply with the music you love. So, you can ask DJ to update your personalized listening session based on the music you want to hear at the moment, whether you're looking for something to set the mood for a date night or some high-energy tracks to keep you hyped up for a party. And, of course, we know about the AI playlist generator. That enables users to enter a text prompt from which the tool will generate music suggestions. YouTube Music rolled out a feature called Ask Music, letting users use AI to turn to an idea into a customized radio experience by discovering what you want to hear. Spotify acknowledged the feature remains in beta with ongoing refinements expected. And meanwhile, when we hear the share of ear research from Nielsen Research, or Edison Research, the fact that Spotify is one of the major benefactors of the 13-year-old and up audience buying into streaming services, because Spotify reported a 12% year-over-year jump in their premium subscriber base to 268 million, the highest first quarter subscriber amount of ads since 2020. Operating income reached a record high of $535 million, and revenue grew 15% year over year to $4.4 billion. They're making money. And again, they're making money, and they are spending it and sending royalties back to the artists, which that system is kind of working for all those folks. It's not that much money, but at least they're getting paid. Unlike going through the old system, which is not really helping them that much. Apple Music has a new migration tool helping users shift away from Spotify. This is interesting. So you have a playlist that's existing right now on your Spotify, and you want to switch services, but you've already taken the time to go and build those playlists. Well, Apple Music now has a way for you to go ahead and migrate. So you can now migrate from other streaming music services and let users retain their library and playlist archives. So February, they had started beta testing to help users shift from streaming services others than Apple Music to Apple Music. So now the tool is being rolled out. So if you want to take your existing Spotify playlists, you can easily migrate it over to Apple Music. The tool is a collaboration with a service called SongShift, an app that's used to transfer playlists and libraries between a number of other streaming services. Now, previously, a user could shift bought song libraries between services like iTunes in the past, they couldn't move songs between streaming services. Instead, they had to read data from third-party services and recreate it on Apple Music. But now it can transfer saved playlists as well as like songs and albums to Apple Music. Now, the support page warns it's not necessarily going to be all the information, but it'll be what can be picked up, tracked versions, and will vary between third-party services. And that users can initiate the transfer from an iPhone, iPad, or Android device using the settings of Apple Music and selecting transfer music from other music services. And when they sign into their account, select what to transfer, they can tap Add to Library, and it just goes like that. YouTube now has a new top podcast chart. I know. These podcasts that I do on the network, they're not going to be in that top 100 that's going to be set up here, but they're going to set up their own thing. So we're going to know that Apple Music has one, Spotify has their own set of their top 100 playlists. But now there's going to be a weekly podcast show chart highlighting the top 100 podcasts in the U.S. Listings are updated each Wednesday. Again, only U.S. right now. Their inaugural list will be covering May 5th through May 11th and sorts out the top 100 podcasts available on the platform based on their popularity among U.S. audiences. Now, Google's not keeping track of total views like Spotify would highlight now with their own podcast listings. They're using a metric based on overall minutes listened. So the current list right now for the weekly top podcast shows on the YouTube charts right now in the top 10. Dr. Insanity is number 10. Smosh Reads Reddit Stories 9. This past weekend with Theo Vaughn is 8. Club Shay Shay is 7. The H3 podcast is 6. The Midas Touch podcast is 5. 48 Hours is 4. Rotten Mango is 3. Kill Tony is 2. And the Joe Rogan Experience is number 1. And the chart is mostly encompassed by nothing that's really grassroots. It's a lot of big, recognizable names that are out there that are up here in the first place. That's all there is to it. And as we said, radio is trying to hold on to its ground and trying to expand more of it. A story from Radio Inc. talks about the fact that senators are urging the SEC to deregulate ownership caps. So a bipartisan letter from 22 U.S. senators reached the SEC to update broadcast ownership rules. And the letter states now, we're not going to go through what they're trying to say, but they want to campaign for deregulation around ownership caps. And right now it's gaining momentum on Capitol Hill. In April, 73 bipartisan members of the U.S. House of Representatives signed a similar letter to call for immediate reform. And of course, there were other organizations doing the same thing. But remember, their excuse for wanting the ownership caps to be dropped is they're trying to say the internet is their competitor, not themselves. Curtis Legate from the NAB says that the SEC needs to modernize decades-old broadcast ownership rules that impede local stations' ability to invest in our newsrooms, innovate, and serve our communities. Curtis, how many newsrooms are operating right now? Are we still talking about radio or what? Because again, we're talking about ownership caps, which just talking more about newspapers or television stations probably, but not so much radio. Local broadcasters compete every day with trillion-dollar tech companies, yet we remain shackled by ownership restrictions that are premised on the outdated notion that broadcasters compete only with one another for audience and advertising. You know, I remember when Google actually did advertising for a while with iHeartRadio. Remember they actually had their own ads being dropped in? And that didn't work out much because Google wasn't getting much out of those ads in the first place when they were selling them. So this in to church, they want to urge Chairman Brandon Carr of the SEC and the full commission to act expeditiously to empower local stations to deliver the most trusted news, emergency information, and vital content Americans rely on. Blah, 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 blah. Now, in this whole story, there was a story for the Broadcast Law blog. David Oxenford writes about this, about what can happen if the ownership rules and deregulation does play out. What's the outcome of all this? Well, here's what they say. First of all, we know at the recent NAB convention in Las Vegas, the interest was in changes of the rules and the possible routes they're talking about which the SEC could do action on changes in the ownership rules could occur. So first of all, local ownership rules are different from the national cap on television ownership, which is the NAB has asked the SEC to abolish. A review of the 39% national audience cap was started in the Payne administration, which is what, going back to Obama administration, right? And the NEBs took in the revive and resolve that proceeding, arguing that national caps are no longer necessary given the competition from so many other national video services that are unrestrained by any ownership limitations. They're talking about the internet. So they're talking about the local rules and how many commercial radio or TV stations one party can own in each market is creating issues for many broadcasters across the country, both large and small. Local rules generally limit TV owners to have 2 stations in any market, unless it can be shown in the public interest. No owner can acquire an attributable interest in 2 of the top 4 rated stations of every market. For radio, the largest market, no owner can own more than 8 radio stations, and only 5 can be in the same service, AM or FM. And let's just make this clear. How many companies in these markets are owned by 1 or 2 companies? Whether it's iHeart or Odyssey or Hubbard Media or whatever there is out there. Cox, they just don't make any difference in the fact that radio is owned only by a couple of companies because they're clustered and put together, and all these stations not being individually operated in a real way that's really significant for the audience of these different stations and the formats that they serve. They don't care about that. So television is a different story, and you know what are you going to do about that? But radio, it's the contention that I have. 8 stations in any market. And now they want to just drop it to make sure all of them can be bought. That doesn't make any sense. Given recent declines in the radio advertising markets, the competition from digital media, in many markets there are struggling stations ready to sell to any serious buyer, when the only likely buyer is another in-market operator who cannot buy because of ownership rule limitations. So here's the part 2. Do we see if the ownership caps are dropped? What's the chance that iHeartRadio and all these other bigger companies that don't have the money to invest and buy more stations, okay, or don't have the stock money to go and buy with it, no advertising revenue to speak of, are they going to just get more money loaned to them? Are they going to be able to just go ahead and ask for more investment money and get somebody to go ahead and raise funds for them so they can continue to buy more stations? Or somebody buys for them and then sells them over to that company. The problem is, are we going to have another gold rush of stations being bought because all these smaller radio stations, whether they're local owners or they're just stations that are underperforming that just want to be sold to somebody else because they can't sell the ads on it, that they'll get sold, and who's going to buy them? It's going to be some big corporate company that does that. That will continue to take more stations off from being operated correctly. I mean, it's not serving the public interest. They're just buying up stations just to buy them up. And they can just fill up whatever time they want with it. Might be the same stuff that's going to be around all across the board. There is an outlet for increases in local TV ownership, and that the SEC can allow 2 of the top 4 stations to combine upon a public interest showing. The new administration of the SEC right now appears to be much more likely to allow combinations, so the Media Bureau has granted 2 such combinations, one based on the argument that the station to be required was a failing station that needed rescuing by a stronger local competitor, and a second based on a public interest showing about the market. And both were granted very quickly by normal SEC standards, just 3 or 4 months after being filed. And having these clear rules on these combinations, one based on the argument that the station has to be required, as again, it took 3 or 4 months to make these change under the normal SEC standards, that they were rubber stamped, quickly moved along. So having rules on these combinations is preferable to relying on a subjective waiver standard or opaque public interest evaluations with the SEC, but a path to more local ownership, whereas for radio ownership, any such path is less clear. The path is at least essential, if not more so, than the path to local ownership, deregulation in the TV industry. So they're saying that big digital media companies have now over 2/3 of the advertising revenue, majority going to Google, Meta, and Amazon, taking money away from local media. And radio competes for the listening audience with music services offered by many of these same tech companies, along with specialized digital audio competitors like Spotify and thousands of independent audio creators who can create audiences through podcasts and other digital platforms. Okay, but they're just taking your audience away. But just a question, what about the advertising? Spotify, iTunes, Pandora, they're not taking your advertising away. See, so radio is unable to sell ads. But then what are you selling to your audience right now that you can actually sell to them? You don't have much of anything to work off of. So they're trying to make the argument here that, so none of these competitors are subject to ownership limitations, but a broadcast radio operator can only own at most 8 stations, even in markets where there are at least over 100 local radio stations. So you want the LA market and New York markets that still at least have some individuality, Chicago, San Francisco, do you want those markets to be infiltrated by corporations so they can own all the stations in the market, micromanage them, take away all their staffing, basically make them jukeboxes where they're going to be putting out stagnant radio playlists, very tight, nothing to it, just the bare minimum necessary of programming so they can put ads on it. That's it. And then they can sell to the advertisers, hey, we got 90 stations here for you to go ahead and put your advertising on. And one of those stations your audience is listening to. You should buy on it individually. Of course, we can't give you a package where you go on all the stations. We're going to sell to you. We're going to sell you by individual station and by that station stream and by their website. We're going to, we got a multifaceted way of giving you value for all these different platforms you're going to be promoting on. In December 2023, the Jessica Rosenworcel SEC administration determined that consolidation by radio operators would not allow them to better compete against digital media and that the public needed to be better protected against local broadcasters getting bigger. Yeah, SEC decision is an appeal, and now Chairman Carr dissented from the 2023 decision that the judges did not raise questions indicating that they took concerns about digital competition seriously, but questions from judges didn't necessarily indicate the results of any appeal. If they decided the commission did not adequately consider the effects of the competition, they could order the FCC to quickly reevaluate their decision or even vacate the rules entirely, as they had not been shown to be in the public interest as required by the quadrennial review process. Whether through court action or through the FCC, these lawyers here at the Broadcast Law Blog, they're expecting that substantial deregulation of the local broadcast ownership rules should occur if the Republican members of the FCC stay true to the positions expressed in the earlier proceedings. And the rules would be unlikely to be effective until late this year or more likely in 2026. But broadcasters still should be considering the options that changes in local ownership rules could provide, whether as being a buyer or a seller of broadcast stations, if, as we expect, the rules are relaxed in the not-too-distant future. If it's allowed and the ownership caps are able to be dropped and abolished, radio as we know it will just be totally consolidated, homogenized. You will have corporations that will infiltrate and take the bulk of the best possible stations on the airwaves. The most powerful stations, they will take them all up. And then what are you going to get out of those? They will all be operated under the same building, in clusters, with very little staffing to support them. I mean, that's just what's going to happen. So ownership is going to change altogether, and what are they going to do? And they're doing such a bang-up job right now, as a matter of fact, of trying to hold on to any kind of audience now as we speak. And here's the argument I would come back at them about ownership caps. So the audience for ad-supported audio, which is what radio cares about the most, they're ad-supported. Nielsen put out a quarterly audio report that for adults 18 years old and up in the U.S., consumers spent 66% of their daily listening time with radio versus 19% for podcasts, 12% for streaming radio audio services, and 3% for satellite radio. So the radio share of ad-supported listening was 1% lower in this quarter, and podcasting went up 1%. Adults 35 years old and up spend 73% of time listening to radio, 61% at ages 25 to 54, which is the target demographic, 18 to 34 at 47%. So the demographics that radio cares about, they're still getting the majority of the audience. But yet they're going to make enough of a stink to get the SEC convinced and persuaded to let them buy more stations, because that's what they need to go and compete against Spotify and Apple Music and YouTube Music and all alike. That's what they're saying. One other radio story I'm going to bring up real quick. We can talk about the part that the Copyright Register, a proponent of the radio performance rights, was fired recently. I don't know if that's going to be making so much of a change, but there was some issue about this particular Registrar of Copyrights and Director in the U.S. Copyrights Office, a supporter of radio airplay performance royalties, was fired, and it was because of the fact that there was a report that was being put out prematurely on the use of copyrighted material to train generative AI models. And they talk about that some broadcasters may not be upset with the firing, but based on the public performance on radio station airplay, that's one of the things that was tough to go and see, that she's going away, even though she has that feeling for that. So in a congressional hearing, Perlmutter says the U.S. is one of the very few countries in the world that do not provide a full public performance right for sound recordings covering over-the-air broadcasts. And while there's little that the Copyright Office can do to create a performance right, it's not directly involved in the rate-setting process for music. I guess I don't know what it is where her role of being a proponent for performance royalties, which I'm in favor of. I don't know if the Copyright Office or the Trademark Office or wherever else she's worked in before has any kind of say towards that, but I don't know. It was an interesting story to see about that. Of course, it's all about political things they're talking about with us anyway. There was a new audio commercials contract from SAG-AFTRA, revamping their structure and expanding AI protections. So new commercials contracts deal, which includes a new structure for audio commercials, simplifies compensation, reflects current media consumption habits, includes the union's strongest protections yet against the misuse of AI. Interesting part of that. Audio commercials contract. I didn't realize SAG-AFTRA was even part of that, but okay. One last story I wanted to get from, and this is from Sean Ross over at RadioInsight.com, about Top 40. Is it going to play hip-hop music again? Because there was a point where it did, right? Because hip-hop's not really crossing over into the hit charts right now, into Top 40 radio or, CHR radio as it is today. At the moment, Kendrick Lamar and SZA's Luther, which is the number one song now for 12 weeks coming up, it's number one right now on CHR. Drake's Nokia is the top 20 pop song right now. And Kendrick Lamar music, you have also Squabble Up on TV Off from his album that are also playing pretty well. Doechie's top 5 song, Anxiety, and Denial's a River in the top 25. And it looks like the hip-hop's starting to have a footprint again in top 40. But right now, CHR is playing songs that don't even fit the format right now anyway of what pop music is out there, because pop music is making a big change. So Sean Ross makes the point that if playing too many hip-hop titles is what program directors are concerned about, it's the same it was in the discussion about country crossovers over the last 2 summers. That there's still so many hits that top 40 should be missing any. As long as the supply of hits from other genres are good, there's enough available mainstream pop to play in between, because right now we're at the point where hit music is very stagnant, very homogenized, and very stale. There's not a lot of variety when you listen to a hit music station. There's not much of it anyway right now as it is. He also talks about the fact that seeing that there's more hip-hop and R&B being pushed out there by big-name artists, that it helps to go ahead and overcome the rise of TikTok rap, leaning more towards heavily on ballad and mid-tempo R&B than at any time in the last 35 years. The time before the radio station most committed to hip-hop always won. R&B and hip-hop radio is waiting for its rebound, and that streams have given them many hip-hop Hot 100 hits, as it has so far, but it's more about how much more that the format's reach can improve, and that if CHR will get more lateral support on more types of music, not just country. Because songs used to be crossover. From country, from dance, and from hip-hop. But CHR, your top 40 radio, doesn't want to do that. But that's because of the modus operandi of these big corporate radio outlets. And look what they're going to do now. They're colluding with the record labels, is messing things up right now for streaming. And streaming's trying to do more to kind of keep chipping away at them, which is the focus of the program tonight. But then more than anything, radio doesn't care about trying to fix the problem they have right now. They think that their problem is they need to get more stations to buy so they can compete with tech, compete with these internet companies and the streaming services, which is not the answer. But are they going to care about doing anything about it? Are they going to care about doing anything to fix their stations and make them more relevant? Play a fresher mix of music. Put some DJs in there. I don't know. They're not thinking about that at all. They just don't care. So anyway, come back next week to another Broadcasters Podcast. I appreciate listening into the program. KingofPodcasts.com is where you can find all my content. And come back next week because content is king and the control of your content is in your hands.